and welcome to the Cyber Minds podcast, a podcast where we get to meet and explore the minds of thought leaders in the cybersecurity and technology world. My name is Mark Williams and I am the founder of Quigley Cyber. At Quigley Cyber, we work with clients to provide the best cybersecurity resources and services to help you build the best teams and solutions. And as we say at Quigley Cyber, it's always about the people. So because the strength of your cybersecurity capability is always about the people, in this podcast, we get to meet some of those people that make this industry so great. On the pod today, we have Suthagar Seevaratnam. He is a cybersecurity and technology executive specialising in strategy, operations and organisational transformation. His career has blended experience and skills across consulting, public and higher education sectors, working in exceptionally challenging, complex and high-risk operational environments. He uses human-centred design combined with technical knowledge and risk-based approaches to help build achievable and sustainable security outcomes. He has worked closely with C-level executives and boards to help set strategy and build security culture. Suthagar is currently the CISO for Vocus, an Australian challenger telecommunications company, where he heads their enterprise security group and leads a security transformation program. Suthagar, welcome and thank you for joining us on the Cyber Minds podcast.
Pleasure to be here, Mark.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the pod, let's talk 3D printing. We touched on this a little bit on Friday when we caught up, and we do tend to touch on it whenever we do catch up. I know you have two printers. I know you're a 3D printing enthusiast. I know you, as of Friday, I now know you have a special little tent set up for your printing that might otherwise be used for more nefarious activities, such as growing certain plants, but that's definitely not the case, just in case federal police or any of the like are listening. What do you like about 3D printing?
I think there's two bits. One, the challenge of it, right? It's complicated. There's so much involved in it, and there's so much that can go wrong and does go wrong, especially with resin printing. And it's the challenge of being able to get it right. But also at the end of it, you get this something really cool. You get like something that you really wanted, like you might have even designed yourself, and it's now real. And I growing up, I couldn't have imagined being able to imagine something and then, a couple of hours later having that thing in front of me in prototype. That's magical for me. So, and there's a huge amount of learning involved in it. Right? So it's personally rewarding.
Okay, fantastic. So you like the challenge and you like achieving the goal that you set out to from the start. Okay. All right. Now, into the nitty-gritty, which isn't really that nitty or gritty, but how would you describe what you do to a 90-year-old person who probably doesn't really understand computing that well and definitely doesn't really understand the concepts that relate to cybersecurity?
A very good question. The person who comes to mind is my grandmother, who is around about 90. And I was, how would I explain my job to her? Right? So I would say to her, I keep you safe. And I keep you safe when you use a computer. And it's the computer version of locking your front door, arming your alarm, closing the blinds, and protecting the family valuables. So it's the same as when you would lock up the house if you were going outside. Well, I do the same for you when you're using your computer. And that's probably how I would explain it.
Okay. Yep. Makes sense. I like it.
I'm not sure she would necessarily translate that as a valuable profession, but that's probably how I explain it to her.
Yeah. She might just regard you as a fancy, unnecessary lock.
That's right.
All right. Very good. Thank you. All right. And then conversely, how would you describe what you do to a 9-year-old person who is a digital native? They're very comfortable with technology, but they wouldn't necessarily understand what cybersecurity is or even why it's important in their lives or in the lives of everyone in the community.
That's a really topical question. My child is 9 and increasingly using computers, and not just tablets or phones, but PCs. And I don't want to shield them from the internet. I want them to know that it's out there and there's no escaping it, really. So I think the first time I tried to explain this was, hey, I stop the bad guys from the internet coming and sneaking into your computer and stealing your stuff or breaking your computer. I did try to explain to my child that it's like being a superhero for computers, but that didn't wash. I think I would explain it in terms of, like anything in your life, anything you value, you should protect. And you like using your computer, you like using your digital devices, your gaming consoles, and they all need to be protected because, unfortunately, there are parts of the internet or people from parts of the internet that will try and damage that and take away your enjoyment.
Yep, absolutely. And so relevant. From a timing perspective, we obviously had some significant breaches and then related concerning discussion over the weekend relating to some breaches that occurred in the super industry. So no one can be complacent, I suppose.
No, absolutely not.
All right. So you talked about superhero. What is your origin story?
Yeah. Let me start with the broad, and then I'll so I can anchor in, right? So like a lot of cyber professionals, I think I just started off being curious. Tinkering, breaking things, trying to put them back together, occasionally successfully. But so I always had this, even as a kid. I just wanted to pull stuff apart. I wanted to know how things worked. I broke more toys than I played with. I think that would be fair to say. Much to the embarrassment of my parents. But I do recall one time at uni, I accidentally hacked something, and I do stress it was an accident. I was sitting in a disused lab, which just didn't have any protection on it at all, any of these computers, and I was just playing around because I knew how to. And all of a sudden, I managed to get into the uni's library system, which back then you had to book everything. You had to book everything in advance. You had to wait in line, and it was very laborious. And suddenly, I had this back door to everything. And I sat there thinking, oh my gosh, this is incredible. Like, wow, I have just saved myself so much time. But then I remember the train trip home thinking, this doesn't feel right. There's something that's not right. It's fun, and yet it's not right. Like, it just feels some level of wrong, but I can't put my finger on it. Anyway, that kind of led to a very roundabout career in national security. But even during most of that time, computers were a hobby for me. They weren't the core part. I was a security professional long before I was a cybersecurity professional, and it wasn't until much later on that I realized, hey, these things connect, these things come together, and there are these two skill sets that I've got, and I can bring them together, and I can use that curiosity to protect people. And that just clicked. It wasn't about the tech. It was about this trust. And I remember thinking back to that uni moment, thinking what I did was I breached somebody's trust, right? So, and that's what wasn't sitting well with me. So this is where it sort of started for me. It was that, and I wanted to make it people orientated, not just tech orientated. Not that I don't love tech, I do, but there was that combination of both. I think that's been driving me ever since.
Yeah.
So there's my origin story.
It's a good origin story, I think, because other people, I mean, that was power you had in that moment.
Yeah.
And you could have used it for evil, and some do. But you've harnessed that and thought, oh, hold on, I can channel this. You know, I have some capability here, I have some knowledge, and I realize how powerful this is. There's going to be people that want to abuse that power, but but you chose to use it for good and help the broader community. I think that's fantastic.
I hope so. And I hope my university forgives me, but I, for bypassing the queue system.
We won't discuss which uni that was, but I think they might have been breached a number of times since anyway. All right. Now, there's increasingly discussion within security and corporate circles about whether the Chief Information Security Officer should be the Chief Security Officer and be charged with leadership over not just digital security, but physical security. Now, to me, they seem like completely different beasts. And I can't quite understand how they mesh together well. What are your thoughts on that?
Ooh, another good question. There are a couple of threads, I think, to this. And I said before, I started off in a security career rather than a cybersecurity career. So I think a little bit of my commentary here is going to be framed from that perspective. Threats, to my mind, are convergent. So physical, personnel, cyber, they all can converge. They do converge. And I was saying before that even cyber is a people challenge, right? And there is a personal dimension to even cybersecurity. Protecting physical assets, there is a physical dimension to cybersecurity. These things do naturally intersect. But even if you look at them as their own domain, increasingly these threats are converging. So in the security of critical infrastructure legislation, it talks about an all hazards approach to risk. And from a security perspective, that is personnel, physical, and cyber all combined. We've seen threat actors use all mechanisms. I mean, if you think about cyber, like ransomware, for example, right? Yeah, there's a technology element to it. There's also a people element to it. It's fundamentally tricking people and building a security culture, building an awareness of your responsibilities and what you can do to protect yourself, which is fundamental to personnel security, applies in a digital domain as well, as much as it does in a physical domain. And so there is that being able to understand your physical environment also helps you protect computer assets, as I mentioned before. So I've always found it very difficult to remove them or separate them out. That they are always convergent to me. And you look at the tradecraft of certain threat actors, be they nation states or be they organised criminal groups, they employ all three. So what does that mean organisationally? There's not a one answer to that. It's going to be different for different organisations. If you're the sort of organisation that is dealing with a multi-vector type threat, it's good to have a CISO. And you may have a CISO and a CISO underneath. Right? Yeah, that's possible. For other organisations, they may be one and the same person because the scale simply isn't there. And so the CISO almost de facto becomes the CISO because they're just dealing with security writ large. So I think there's not one answer. Like, should you have a CISO? Should you have a CISO? It's what's right for your organisation and the threats that you face and the risk appetite that you have and the complexity that you're dealing with should determine whether or not you should scale to a CISO type organisation. So if you're a large one, chances are having a CISO is a good thing.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. And it does make me see that is something that probably organisations will increasingly do. There's probably not a lot of people out there like yourself that can provide that all-encompassing leadership and have an understanding of both sides of elements of threat there. So I think that's probably going to be a challenge for the industry because a lot of people that are traditionally digitally focused are going to have to broaden their capabilities.
Yeah. You're right about the skill set. It's not easy to find that in a single individual who has walked multiple pathways. I've met them, but they are quite rare. You're absolutely right about that. And more often than not, you end up having to have someone who's got some expertise and some knowledge in some of the, like a core bit of expertise, maybe in cyber, and then some secondary knowledge in some of those other areas, and then you're just bringing in some experts underneath them to fill those knowledge gaps. It's really hard to scale that. It really is. But that's not to say there aren't people out there. There are some excellent CSOs out there who really do know their trade craft very well.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Now, you have been in the middle of several cyber crises that I'm aware of, as these days, unfortunately, have most CISOs.
Yeah.
Some more significant than others, obviously. What is your go-to keep calm strategy? Is it mediation? Is it coffee? Is it controlled panic? What does it look like?
So I'll tell you, there was an evolution to this for me. Right? So originally, I remember sort of the first few times I was sort of in this sort of situation. But it was taking a very long, deep breath and trying to center myself, because there was this wash of emotion coming over me. And my natural sort of instinct is, okay, stay calm, stay really calm, block out the noise, and just focus on yourself and try and calm yourself down and try and be sanguine. And there was a lot of self-control. Over time, though, it's become more of a habit than anything else. It's a bit sad, given maybe that you'd have to form a habit out of crisis. But what's really important is a piece of knowledge. And that piece of knowledge keeps me incredibly sane during these really almost uncontrolled, occasionally uncontrolled moments. And that is knowing that I'm not alone in facing that challenge. But I do have great people around me to help, supportive leadership around me to help. And then the experience and the knowledge and the training you have just kicks in and takes over. It becomes a battle rhythm almost. And you know that you're supported. But I think the first time this happened to me, I felt very alone, but this was always on my shoulders. Today, I don't think at all. I know that there's this network around me, right? And I always ask myself, or remind myself and the people around me, let's not jump at shadows. It's a phrase I use a lot, don't jump at shadows. What do we know for sure? What do we not know? What are the facts we have? Let's not respond out of fear. Let's be calm, let's be collected. And when you have a lot of people around you acting exactly in the same way, you have this collective objectivity and you lean into it and you know exactly what you're doing and what you're looking for. That's not to say we get it perfect by no stretch of the imagination, but at least we minimize the mistakes that can happen by jumping to the wrong conclusion or taking a reactionary action in such a way that it leads you down the wrong path or makes you draw the wrong conclusion. Yeah, so that's how I handle it. But it's different for different people, of course.
Yeah, look, I think that's, knowing you and the importance that you place on your team and organisational culture, not just from a point of view of culture to help manage the cyber risk, but also the importance of your team and how they need to be able to gel together and how you need to be able to connect with them and they connect with each other to deal with those challenging times. You've always made it clear that's important.
Yeah, and it's important to the leadership around you. Right? The board wants to know, the executive wants to know. And you have to be calm, collected, in control. Even if you are in the middle of that fog of war, even if you don't know what all the facts are, it is really important to the people around you that they can trust your judgment, that they are able to rely on you to be the calm center. Even if they're worried and their minds are spinning at 1,000,000 miles an hour, you have to not react to that immediately. It's really, really important because it's not just your emotions you're managing, it's everyone else's as well. And I remember in one breach that happened, I remember walking out of a co-board meeting, and this was an organisation that had been hit. This is the second time. And I remember one of the very, very senior people of this organisation walking alongside me after this meeting down the corridor, and she turned to me and she said, "It feels different this time." And I said, "What do you mean?" Because I wasn't there for the first one. So what do you mean? She said, "This time it feels like we are in control." And I couldn't have been more happy. We were still in the middle of dealing with all of this, the fallout, the repercussions, the inevitable reputational harm. And there she was saying, "I feel like I'm in control." And that's a great compliment to anyone handling a cyber crisis.
No doubt, no doubt. And I mean, your team are going to take cues about how to handle this from you as their leader. And I know for a fact you very much are a leader. You're not a manager. I've helped you build those teams, but I've also helped or worked with a number of those people who, some of which have worked with you now across 3 different organisations, and they wouldn't keep coming back if you weren't offering them something, and it's leadership that you are offering them.
That's very kind.
Oh, well, that's what I've observed. And I mean, you talked about the importance of being calm, collected, and in control.
Yeah.
Aside from that, what do you think are the most important qualities that a cybersecurity leader should possess?
So let's sort of remove the calm out under pressure bit, right? Because we've talked about that in a crisis sort of situation. But 99% of the time, or hopefully 99% of the time, you're not in that sort of situation. And I think if I was telling anyone what kind of qualities they should be reflecting on, it would be integrity first and foremost. A strong sense of purpose. You have to value what you protect, because if you don't, the heart's not going to be in it. Your energy's not going to be in it. I remember going to an overseas conference and talking to a bunch of other CISOs, and one of them got up on stage and said, "One thing you have to remind yourself is you will have bad days." And I remember, I still have that written in my notebook in like big, black, bold letters, "You will have bad days." And then, my previous version of myself has sort of chopped out the word day, and it's got weeks, months, years. And I think that was a sadly prophetic statement, because it is a little bit like that. It does feel like there's this never-ending challenge, and you're always sort of treading water, and you're never sort of quite getting to the finish line. So having integrity, a good sense of self, knowing the difference between what you should and should not do, having a strong sense of purpose, that North Star that keeps you going, because you are going to have bad days, and that's going to drive you. That energy is going to come from your sense of purpose. Having a good radar, or a sort of sixth sense, if you like, for risk, knowing where those things are coming from. I've seen a few sort of mind maps of like the mind of a CISO, and I sit there looking at it thinking, did I miss something? Like, do I not think about these things? And there's so much to think about, right? There's so much. Like, if you look at that mapping, it's that 360-degree sort of vision that you have to have. You can't focus on all of it. And so you need to be able to delegate and give it and trust the people around you. You also need to know where to hone in on certain things, because they're the most important things right now. And that's going to change over time. So having that radar is really good. But also the knowledge, and it's a thematic for me, you're not just protecting data and systems. You're protecting people and their values. That's what drives me. That's, I think, the thing that I look for in cyber leaders that I recruit is what drives you. Are you protecting people? Do you feel that sense of being able to protect people and their values? Because if you're not aligned to that, you're not going to get through those bad days really easily. If you think it's all about the tech, it's not going to lead to the complete outcome. It's not necessarily a wrong outcome. It's just, it's not going to be complete. So there's also organisational change skills as well, the so-called soft skills. And these are, you need to be a good persuader. You need to be able to help drive change. It is ultimately a people challenge. And it's one that involves technology. So you have to have a curiosity about people and their behaviours, as well as curiosity about the technology and its relationship to the people inside the organisation that you're looking after. And every organisation has a very different relationship internally. This idea of a socio-technical relationship, it's different for different organisations, and you need to know both. You need to know the why of it all. And that comes down to being curious about people. So I would add that to the list of qualities or traits, if you like, that a good cyber leader should have.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, I think cybersecurity people in general, if they're going to last in the industry, they need to be quite unique, because they need to be able to deal with this always there stress and pressure of someone's trying to make us have a bad day. Someone's trying to breach the perimeter. And it's a warlike mentality. And the CISO is the general at the front leading the troops. And not everyone's cut out for that.
No, I think it requires a resilient personality. It requires one that doesn't jump shadows, like I said before. Someone who was very new to cyber, someone that I very deeply valued as a friend. When he started to have his cybersecurity journey, I guess, in his mind, he was a superhero. In his mind, he was like Tony Stark, right? He was this sort of techno wizard, and he was going to save everyone. And he really felt it. And I think my advice to him and to everyone else is don't have a hero complex about this, because it's a team sport. It's not all on you. And yes, you're in charge. Yes, you're accountable. Yes, you're going to have to commit yourself fully to this. So believe in what it is that you're protecting. And in addition, know that you're not alone. Know that you're sort of more like the Justice League than you are a superhero, and everyone is pushing in that direction, right? And it's not just you who's going to have a bad day. It's a lot of people who have a bad day, and you need to help make sure that they're okay, that there is a tomorrow, and that you can fight. And maybe we miss something this time. So compassion is really important. Someone said it to me, these aren't my words, but someone said it to me really, really well. Have unrelenting compassion and unrelenting standards. And I think that's absolutely right. You're always relentless in your pursuit of excellence, because you need to be, because the threat actors are, and you need to match that. At the same time, you need to be compassionate and forgiving. You're dealing with human beings who make mistakes, not intentionally most of the time. Not everyone's a malicious insider or trying to take down your system. 99% of the time, they're just trying to do their job. So having compassion for that, having compassion for yourself as well. Oh, I missed that bit on my radar. Okay, well, you'll know that for next time. You just have to have all of those things convergent, and that really comes back to being a person of integrity, being a person of compassion, having a sense of purpose. These North Stars sort of help guide you, because I've discovered that cyber brings out the best in people and sometimes the worst in people as well. And you don't just want to be a cyber leader. You want to be a really good cybersecurity leader. And that comes from within.
Yeah. Okay, great. Now, you talked about the idea of misconceptions as it relates to cybersecurity.
Yeah.
What's the most bizarre or hilarious misconception someone's had about your job?
I feel like I'm going to give away the organisation here, but I'll do my best. I joined an organisation which didn't really understand cybersecurity or what a CISO did. So I spent a lot of time talking to a whole bunch of people. I spent like weeks and weeks just talking to people about what my role was and what I would do for them and listening to what they wanted from the role now that they had a better idea. And sometimes it was like explaining it to my grandmother, and sometimes it was like explaining it to my 9-year-old, and everything in between. And I said to one person, it's computer security, right? Yes, it does have something to do with computers. That's true. And this person leans forward and says, "Yeah, we've had computer crime here before." I'm leaning in, thinking, "Oh, okay, tell me more. I want to know more. Like I just got here. I want to know more about this." And this guy says, "Well, we had this system admin who was smuggling cannabis out of our IT shop in empty computer cases, and he was running this racket where he was using computer cases to smuggle cannabis." And I said, "Well, yes, that is technically a crime involving computers. You are correct. That is true. I can see that, but probably a little bit different to what I deal with. So perhaps it's more the usage of computers when they're plugged in, rather than them being used as a transport mechanism for illicit material." So I try to keep a very straight face. I really did. But this person was genuinely serious about this is what I could help them with. We're talking about convergent risks before. There you go.
I love it. That's great. Clearly a little bit more work to do with that person, but I'm sure you got there in the end.
We did.
Brilliant. Now, we've talked about leadership quite a lot. And I think for most leaders, mentoring is a key part of that function.
Yeah.
What's your approach to mentoring or developing the next generation of cybersecurity leaders?
Let me start with a phrase that I use when I'm hiring someone or we've just hired someone. We hire good people to tell us what to do, not the other way around. And I'm looking for someone, no matter how new they are, who will bring something unique about themselves. Just because I happen to have more experience in a particular field doesn't mean they're not going to see something that I like. A fresh set of eyes, a different perspective, someone who may not have as much baggage or preconceptions, right? That's really powerful. And so I've learned to listen. And you should listen more than you should talk. You should give them the space to lead and to innovate and to fail and to pick themselves up and to keep trying. Because that's where the real learning happens. We can teach all the skills in the world, but if they do not apply it and they do not embrace their failures compassionately and be relentless in the pursuit of that excellence, they haven't really done our jobs. No, one day the baton has to be passed, and they will do it their way, and that's okay. I won't, not just from a cybersecurity perspective, but just from a general leadership perspective. The person you're giving the task you once did, they're not going to do it the same as you. And there is going to be a part of your brain that says, no, I wouldn't do that. Like, that's not how I do it back in my day. And yeah, they're bringing something new to that you've never thought about before. And you've got to sit there reminding yourself that you made exactly the same mistakes when you were doing this, and they have every right to make the same mistakes. And you have to be there as that sort of reflective sounding board saying, well, okay, what happened? Why didn't it work? Why do you think it didn't work? What is your goal for next time? How realistic is that? And what are the options that you want to try next time? What do you want to do next? And it's that coaching type mentality, right? Occasionally you have to be directive, like you can't avoid that in a leadership role, but generally speaking, you want to try to empower them and feel safe in their journey. I would also say this. I read recently a very provocative article that asked a question: is cyber an entry-level job at all? And I've been spending the last week thinking about this. Is it? It's a really unusual question. I didn't really think about that. I always thought of there's a hierarchy. There's sort of entry-level jobs, and like any other industry, you sort of permeate and find your path and work through the ranks. I'm finding myself increasingly thinking differently. Maybe cyber isn't an entry-level job. Maybe there are these other precursor jobs that someone needs exposure to genuinely advance. That doesn't mean you can't start in cyber, but maybe part of your initial journey is somewhere else as well, right? See it from a different perspective, learn a different art. I mean, you're going to be a CISO, I can tell you right now, learning how to run a budget, really top of the list. You're not going to learn that by going to a SANS course or something. It's a brilliant, technical, amazing course, but it's not going to teach you this other stuff. I've spoken to some really, really great cyber professionals who've realised that they don't have GRC or regulatory knowledge. They don't have financial backgrounds. They don't have HR skills. And they recognise that in themselves and they go and find it. So I think maybe cyber isn't an entry-level job. Maybe it's something you bring a lot of different things together because you've walked a multitude of different paths and then you become sort of ready for cyber. I haven't formulated a conclusion on this. It's just an idea that's beginning to form in my mind that if we want to grow the people of tomorrow, maybe we don't just sit them in front of a keyboard. We give them exposure to a lot of different other things. And so that when they do become leaders, they've got a lot more to draw on. That would be my take at the moment.
Yeah. I think it's a really valuable one. We are, I think, asking more and more of our cybersecurity people, particularly as they go higher up the food chain. And so if you are entering, or really at any stage of your cybersecurity career now, or looking to get into it, you've got to consider those things. Where do I want to go, and what skill set do I need at each step of that journey?
You're absolutely right. One of the things I've started doing more recently is not being on the panel for recruitment and putting people outside of my team on that panel. People that come from different parts of the organisation who might have some appreciation of cyber, but not necessarily a strong one. And the reason I do that is because they will tell me something that I can't see. I won't just naturally assume the knowledge or just get into that default state of talking the same language as the person we're trying to recruit. I want to see all those other bits. And maybe I'm not the right person always to test those other bits. So it's always good to have these very diverse views on the panel and not be there because you don't want to distort anyone else's perspective. So I try and keep it slightly thematically connected, but I put other people on the panel and say, well, what did you think? Tell me what you thought. I can always have a subsequent follow-up one-on-one. Right? But those other perspectives are really important. They are, they're not necessarily blind spots for me, but comparatively speaking, they are. And I want those blind spots filled in. What are you saying that I don't see? And what are you feeling that I don't feel? So it's in a similar vein. Can we get well-rounded people? Can we get people who can go beyond just the very sort of technical definition of cyber?
Yeah. I know you and I both really value diversity as a tool to solve problems, really. That people with diverse backgrounds are going to be able to solve a problem far more thoroughly than some homogenous group of people.
Yeah. You're not going to know an organisation and its ambitions and its aspirations and its flaws just by looking at a scene screen all day, right? It's not going to tell you everything. So knowing that bigger picture or being able to understand and contemplate that bigger picture is really valuable. Like I said earlier, having been curious about people, it's really, really cool.
Yeah. Now, I've got so much more that I could talk to you about, but I know we need to wrap things up shortly. So just to close things out, if you could give one piece of advice to someone aspiring to become a cybersecurity leader, what would it be?
Being a leader. I would say this, not just about being a cyber leader. I don't think it's unique to that. It's building on what I said before. Be broad, be curious, be imaginative, be resilient. The technology is going to change. The people, our greatest asset for any organisation, and sadly our biggest risk, they don't change. They don't change, right? In any organisation that you go through, they're not going to change. So getting to know the people of an organisation will make you a good leader in general. And being able to then overlay the cyber component on top of that is going to make you a really great cyber leader. And those soft skills really do matter. I don't like that phrase, soft skills. They're the real hard skills. They're hard to master, especially if you're coming from a technical background. They are the hardest of skills, and people are by far the most difficult vexatious problem that you're ever going to hit as a leader. People can be logical one day and completely illogical the next. And you don't know what's going through their minds. You don't know, the cognitive load is of the person. It's less about tech and more about trust, in my opinion. So if you want to be a leader, particularly in cybersecurity, it's about knowing how to build trust. You need to speak human, not just machine. I saw a sticker on the side of a computer once that said, my computer beat me at a game of chess, but I whooped it at a game of karate, right? And I think it's the inverse when it comes to people. The other thing I would say is our world is changing. Like I've said, it's less about tech, more about trust. But there is a thematic that is emergent at the moment, and that is generative AI. And I talk a lot about machine speed, machine scale. We're dealing with very large data volumes now, complex, interdependent systems, and that's not always legacy. We're trying, I know a lot of CIOs across the world will try and reduce complexity, try and reduce cost, try and reduce the debt. But there's always that challenge. And AI is going to help the industry. It's also going to help us, and we should embrace it. But we've got to maintain parity. Again, a human challenge in my view, right? Because you're trying to shift how people think and how they can work and how they can take advantage of this very, very powerful technology, because I think it is human changing. I've talked to my own team about, the SOC analyst 5 years from now is going to look very different to what it is today. You might look more like a prompt engineer than you do a SIEM analyst, right? So think large, think broad, think at scale. But again, for a leader, think ahead. Think about all these trends that are coming and what they mean to your people and to your organisation. Again, a people thing. So that would be my advice.
Sounds like very good advice to me. Thank you very much. And I think on show today for everyone, we've had your leadership delving into the mind of you, and a bit of an understanding about why people follow you from one organisation to the other. So Suthagar, it's been a real pleasure to have you on as one of our inaugural guests on the Cyber Mindsz podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I look forward to continuing our relationship as you and our relationship progress over the years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Been great.